Oh, hey, Craig.
Hey, David.
Here we are at the end of technically at the beginning, but we've interviewed Camden Spiller. We just finished interviewing Camden Spiller, but he's a business owner mentioned in Aaron Renn's book, Negative World. So, what do you think? Why should people stick around and listen? What's awesome about him?
Well, I mean, it's what's nice about talking to Camden. We're not just talking to a philosopher who's thought about these ideas in a room with a whiteboard, but
Right.
someone who is actually living out these principles in the real world, someone who started a business that's extremely successful. And I think it'll inspire people wherever they find themselves to what does it look like for me to build and have ownership in this world. And um, I especially appreciated him talking about not being someone who just retreats, but hey, we got to be people who just put our feet in the ground and say we're not going to move and we're going to build here and we're going to build a coalition of people around us in our church and our community. Um, so I think there's a lot of stuff to glean, a lot of stuff I'm mulling over as I'm thinking about business and starting things, and I'm excited to get the conversation going with Camden.
Well, I mean, honestly, I couldn't say it better or add anything to that. So, without further ado, here's Camden Spiller. Well, you can't listen to Camden just yet because I'm sitting here editing this episode, and I need to let you know that towards the end of the episode, it turns out we lost about 15 minutes of Camden's audio. So when you get to the end of the episode and it feels like it just cuts off really quickly, it's because that's the situation we're in. So enjoy the episode until you get to the very abrupt ending. All right, here's Camden. Welcome to Kingdom and Culture, where we equip the King's wardens to know his charge and labor unto glory. I'm David, and with me as always is my co-host Craig. And we interview thinkers and theologians from around the world to explore the themes of faith, culture, and the lordship of Christ. All right, welcome back to Kingdom and Culture, and we're here with Camden Spiller. And so, Camden, will you go ahead and introduce yourself, who you are, what you do?
You bet. Camden Spiller, glad to be here with you guys. Appreciate you having me on. I think I do a number of things, but I think probably the aspect we're going to talk about today is business. Aside from that, though, I'm an elder in our local church. I am a husband and father. Just my wife and I just had baby number 10. So
Amazing.
yes, indeed, really really blessed to have a large family, and we live here in the Pacific Northwest. We live in Battleground, Washington, and I run a business called Maddox Industrial Transformer. And that's the business that my brother and I founded 10 years ago, and I think is what we'll spend some time talking about today, as that kind of relates to Christians and culture,
Mm-hmm.
and the commentary Aaron Wrenn has given us in terms of frameworks on that.
Mm-hmm.
But the business, as I mentioned, is about 10 years old. We've got about 300 employees. We punch above our weight in that we've got about a third of the U.S. market share, with still a relatively small headcount. Being transparent with our numbers, we're executing on our growth plan, headed for $1 billion in revenue, and we operate in Greenville, South Carolina, Batavia, Ohio, right outside of Cincinnati, Battleground, Washington, here, which is right outside of Portland, Oregon, and offices in Moscow, Idaho, and we have a number of folks in Texas, but those are kind of our main.
Mm-hmm.
The South Carolina, Battleground, Ohio, Moscow are kind of our main offices and production facilities right now. So that's a little bit of the background there. We also do a lot of real estate, some development and investment work. We have a cafe here on Main Street in Battleground, and a few other things going on. But those, yeah, those are the highlights. Those are the main things
Awesome.
I'm involved into
Yeah.
on a on a daily basis.
Well, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you taking your time. And you know, the reason that we thought it was awesome to have you on, one is just everything you're doing with business and that, but also I actually haven't read this far in the book yet, so excuse me, listeners. But Craig tells me that you are mentioned in the book. You know,
Yeah,
you're actually
yeah,
mentioned in the Negative World book as a good example of what Aaron Rim proposes. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
so I think Craig actually has some questions he wanted to start out with for you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Great, awesome.
I'm curious, when you started Maddox, I'd love for you to tell us actually what it is, what it does. But then,
Yeah,
like,
sure.
was it something you always thought about doing, or what made you
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
start the business when you did it?
Sure. So was it always something I thought about doing? So I grew up right out of high school. I got into the whole .com kind of, we didn't know it was a bubble at that time, but
No,
building
no one
e-commerce
ever does.
websites and
Yep.
you just never see it coming. But it came. But I was a software engineer, so that's how I got
Mm,
started.
Okay.
And I was writing code back in the good old timey days of the late '90s, and got to working for a company that was in this industry. And before I knew that, well, I was being somewhat facetious there. I ended up joining a company that we did some software work for. Worked for them for almost 20 years and really learned the industry. And I don't think you ever, well, I didn't grow up thinking about Transformers, but I really was very blessed with, with kind of a career path of increasing stewardship and just try to be faithful with what the Lord had given me at the time. I think probably framing for the way I had thought about the business was a developing picture because I grew up with my dad running a small furniture repair, upholstery business, and I grew up very much in the small business entrepreneurial kind of mindset. And what I really kind of came to appreciate about a small business and I guess the financial independence, the kind of control of your schedule kind of thing, those kind of things began to be influenced and shaped by my experience in working for this old company that I worked for and seeing some of the strengths and the advantages of a larger business and developing what became more of a vision of a productive household that was not a single autonomous household, but well, in the case of Maddox today, what can 300 productive households, what can 300 men and women shoulder to shoulder accomplish to provide for their families and their community together? And so ended up kind of merging that small business kind of self-employment thing, kind of that kind of certain aspects of it gave way to more of a vision for what we can do together. And I feel like it yeah, that development in my own life, I feel like is something I've enjoyed being able to talk to other entrepreneurs about and really try and provide some contrast or some corrective to an idealization of small independent businesses that really elevate the autonomy above the effectiveness of working together. And I there's a number of ways to draw out analogies. Sometimes small business situations actually be harder on a family than these situations where we're working shoulder to shoulder, as I mentioned, with few hundred other households, and just the impact that can have on your culture, your community, and your households themselves is a lot of what I've been learning about the last few years.
That's awesome. So it's like you have this vision that we've heard Wiley talk about, this productive household,
Yeah.
but then you're like, well, what if we made a productive enough household that we could have multiple working side by side, and so everyone having to like reinvent the wheel themselves? And good luck with
Yep.
you, Charlie. As I know,
Exactly.
let's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
come together. Let's build something together. So
Yep.
so can you tell me how you settled on? So Maddox, what do you guys build?
Yeah.
What do you guys
Yeah.
transformers?
Electrical transformers.
I'm
Yeah.
guessing it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
the kind I played with as a kid.
Our kids think so, but unfortunately, no.
I
It's
know.
electrical transformers.
So
So,
how did you decide
yeah.
on electrical transformers as your, because it doesn't sound
Yeah.
like that was your passion growing up. You were an engineer, software engineer. So I'm guessing
Yep.
there's some
Yep.
crossover there. But I imagine a lot of
Yeah.
people
So,
listening would think about, hey, I want a productive household. How do I even know where to start? I'm curious how you
right.
found transformers, electrical.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was really the doors that were open for me, and it's I began as a software engineer in a company in this industry, and just learned the industry growing up in the ranks through there. And my path is more of one of just stewarding the doors that open before me. And I worked as a software engineer in this company. I got promoted to this and this, and ended up being a partner in the company. And then the Lord closed those doors. That company ownership changed, and the guy who was ended up kind of being the last man standing there needed to sell that business, and it sold. And at the time, it was a really disruptive thing in my life and vision for the way I thought it was going to go. The plan was going to be that I was going to take over as CEO of that company. I was on a development path to where that was my stated, I had a written career plan that I was going to be the CEO of the company when the old guys retired. And as it happened, the old guys had a falling out and then sold the company. And the new folks, of course, had their own plan. And so me and my whole team got laid off, and I was suddenly looking for a way to provide for my family. And I look at it in retrospect, and it was the best worst thing that ever happened to me. It was really a way in which that door closed, and really allowed me to do something I really could have never done in the old company. And that's build from the ground up is something that is a reflection of my own faith and values, and the place, the kind of place uh, I would want to work and be a part of for the rest of my life. And that emphasis on having the right culture, as I mentioned, kind of a reflection of my own faith and values. That was one foundational principle that I had in mind, an organizing principle, if you will. The other was what I at the time articulated as playing for keeps.
Hmm.
And I didn't have friends' insights or vocabulary or a real depth of understanding that he had. But when he came talking about this owned space thing, I
Mm-hmm.
was like, yeah, that's it. That's the thing. That really resonated with me at a very deep level. And what I was calling playing for keeps and building this business was just that. It's making sure that what I saw in the past business I was with, where these guys built it and ended up having to sell the business, and even the culture that was there was negatively altered by the revolving door of different investment groups owning the company over the years. And you kind of see the cultural carnage that kind of thing can bring. And I really didn't want any part of that. I wanted something built for the ground up that um, was built to last. And that's what we've endeavored to do. I mean, the business is only 10 years old, so it's relatively new in that sense. But we very much have a long term mindset. If the Lord wills, we'd love to see this kind of thing grow and last and be a lasting influence in the communities that we are involved in.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Craig, I thought you were going to have another question.
No, you go.
No, great.
It's your turn.
Well, I'm wondering, Ren kind of puts the beginning of Negative World, I think around 2014, if I'm remembering
Yeah,
correctly.
right.
And,
I think he kind of milestones around the Obergefell decision. I think is one of his markers there.
and so remind me again when you started your business.
Yeah, so 2014.
Oh,
I'm sorry,
wow.
2015.
Okay.
February of 2015 actually is February of 2015. So yeah, right in that
Sure.
kind of neg world baby, I guess you'd call the company. So
The Neg
Very
World baby.
negative. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Well, I'm wondering, as a Christian, could you kind of sense that shift from neutral to negative? And then as you were starting
yeah.
this business, were there particular considerations you were having as if you were noticing kind of that shift into a more negative? Obviously, you didn't have the language and the framework, but could you tell a shift
Yeah,
was happening? And then what
certainly.
considerations did you have in that shift?
Yeah, so certainly so, and just corporate, so my experience in kind of world, I guess we put it in these contexts. That's interesting. I really never thought of it as the business starting at the dawn of negative
Hmm.
world, if we put it in that timeline. But I very much could sense that there was a kind of a corporate kind of a discipleship going on, a worldview indoctrination,
Mm.
this is we didn't talk about things being woke in those days, but even as the vocabulary has shifted, there was certainly a recognizable corporate ideology within the business world, and it does trace that kind of positive world, negative world, positive, neutral, negative world. There was, this moment in time where we kind of believed in a neutral, secular kind of culture, and that had its day in corporate culture, and then it shifted to kind of the proto woke kind of culture pretty quickly, and certainly within what I was seeing was certainly the need and the desire to create a place where someone with my faith and worldviews would be affirmed and supported. And some of his work talks about kind of looming dreaded conversations with HR that you
Right.
might sense in certain companies. I have just personally, as kind of a personal investment focus, wanted to focus on investing in men and women who are building families, churches, and
Mhm.
communities. And I want to create organizations that are aligned with that. So, I think that like Rod Dreher mentioned, certain sectors are going to be more exposed to ideological
Mm.
winds than others. In the heavy equipment, electrical equipment industry, this is not like highly politicized. This is not like, we're selling retail clothing or something
Mhm.
like that kind of has these kind of lifestyle value kind of attributes to it. So
Right. No one's
I
virtue
think
signaling with like rainbow transformers or whatever.
exactly that's not
Not
like
not
not
yet,
how it
anyway.
works.
Yeah. I'm gonna start putting
Yeah.
rainbow stickers on all your transformers, and then start a TikTok and get you canceled.
Well, I do, it is nice to be in we'd love to be able to create value for our customers and
Mhm.
not really worry about their politics, and at the same time
Mhm.
be doing a business in a manner that's a faithful witness. So yeah.
Yeah.
There's this part in this book where it talks about how, I'll just read it. It says, this is speaking of you and Maddox, rather than operating in a fear-driven retreat, you went on the advance by moving to the secular progressive Pacific Northwest area. I'm curious,
Yeah.
like how much is there a temptation to retreat out of that because the negative, I think
Yeah.
things like negative
Totally.
world, they're stronger in certain parts of the country,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
always an
Yeah.
ebb and flow. But where we are in the West Coast, the force is strong
Yeah.
with this one. And so like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
what, and I know a lot of people that, like, hey, I'm just going to go to Texas. Hey, I'm just going to go to
Yeah.
wherever, and it's going to all be
Yeah.
fine. Paradise on earth. What keeps you
Yeah. So
fighting
I grew
in
up
the
in
thick of
small
it.
town Texas.
Yeah.
That I was 20 years old when I left Texas. So I grew up in small town Texas, and I spent most of the next period in Greenville, South Carolina. So I about 10 years in or more in Greenville. So I think there is this thought about kind of fleeing to the red states, that kind of thing. I think I think there can be some value in that. I think it's there's kind of that a realm of wisdom in which I think it's fair if somebody wants to find a nice place in Texas or South Carolina or whatever. I think as we've settled here in our case in battleground Washington, we have really seen the value of the micro. And if we talk about the macro political influences, yeah, our governor, we're not aligned with on, hardly any sense. We have
Humans
a very
eat
blue
and they
state.
drink to survive.
Yeah, it's I think the influence of a strong local church and a a good local community are gonna overshadow the absence of those things. And I guess if you could have both, if you could be in a place where you've got a great church and community context in a part of the world where that goes all the way up to the state level, I think that's one thing. But I think there's also such an opportunity to be in these places where you guys are, where we're here, where we've got great church works and we've got good communities here. In battleground Washington, our the pastor C.R. Wiley is fond of saying that this is the most conservative place he's ever lived. And in the middle, in the middle of this blue state, there's a lot of red dots, and
Yeah.
battleground is certainly one of those dots where conservative values, and they may be kind of small town values, that may be kind of the language. It's still a place that is in the relatively unchurched Pacific Northwest. It's the context that we share with you guys just up the road. But at the same time, there's a lot to be said for these small tight knit communities where there's a lot of good people, and there's a lot of sense in which the small towns have not seen the pace of cultural
Hmm.
degradation that some of our more progressive urban densities have.
Well, I was thinking about this the other day with the micro, just driving around downtown Yakima. And Yakima's not tiny. I mean, it's 100,000 people, but like
Yeah,
just the fact that like I know city council members, I know police officers. One pulled me over actually last week. I feel like I know half the police force. I know people
yeah,
and I'm known. When I walk into a place, I'm
yeah,
probably going to see someone I know,
yeah,
and it's just such a rare thing. And in so many communities, you'll never run into someone you know. Here, it's
yeah.
rare. David and I, there's a couple coffee shops we go to. We know everybody that works there. We know if we go there, we're not going to get any work done. So it's you don't, actually, if I want to get work done, I find the
Beautiful.
Starbucks, and that's where you go because Starbucks stinks and no one likes their coffee. So I
Yes,
buy a cup
indeed,
and I set
indeed.
it there and do work if I ever need to go out. So
Drink your herbal coffee in silence.
yeah, that's right.
Yep.
And then throw up after. So yeah, so I think that's a great point. Just the micro, and when you have cachet, you can actually and you just focus on your square inch. As
Yeah.
using the Kuiper term, you
Love it.
can
Yeah.
actually have impact in that world, even if it is
I
negative.
think you really can. Yeah, I think that every square inch includes these square inches, and so I think my upbringing was a lot of moving around. I lived in a dozen places by the time I was in my late teens. So my dad's work was one that took us moving every couple of years. And as Sarah and I really set out to kind of think about how we would order our life and raising kids, it was very important to us that we gave roots to our kids, and we gave our kids, as a part of their inheritance, a community to live in where they would grow up with people who knew their parents and knew them when they were in diapers and all that kind of stuff. And so I think there is a real hazard to the pick up and move kind of mindset that that really keeps you on the move. And this is something that
Right.
I'm really unimpressed with the kind of sometimes the vocabulary is like you fight by flight, like
Hmm.
we're gonna fight by running away kind of thing. And you know, flight is not a bad, it has its place, right? I
Right.
mean, I'm not like, I'm gonna
Yeah.
be,
Everyone has their line. Yeah.
yeah, there's a line, but if you just keep leaving, you end up with generations of leavers.
Mm.
And we want to be generations of stayers and builders, and that's starts
Well,
somewhere.
and if we believe the things that we're building are actually the things that are going to last, like I'm not scared about the cultural trends, really. I mean, they're
Yeah,
gross, but they're not going to
yeah,
last. Um, my kids, my grandkids are going to grow up in a different world than we're
amen,
currently living in. And so, if we actually
amen,
believe that, then we're fine to build what we can. It's to
yep,
repair the ruins, or
amen,
live in the ruins, so our children and grandchildren can actually build and repair them. And then we're going to be the ones left to build once everything is torn down. We're there. It's like
amen,
what's happened in
amen.
Detroit or whatever. Like like everyone
Yeah,
left and everything was so cheap. That was the time to move there. You could actually build and do
yeah,
cool stuff. I think that's going to
exactly,
be the whole
exactly.
whole Western world soon.
Well,
I think you're right.
so to that point, I just recently I saw one of the new St. Andrews ads, and
Yeah.
whatever our listeners think of the school, their ads are so effective because this ad was basically like, hey, you're being handed, your generation's being handed a world that's in ruins.
Yeah.
Carpe chaos. I mean, that was it. Like, seize the chaos and,
Awesome.
and do something
Yeah.
with it. I was like,
Yeah.
that's so awesome.
Well, I think that mindset needs to prevail. We need to have that mindset. We need to disciple our kids in that mindset. I think we need to, we need to strengthen the those of us that folks working alongside us. I think that kind of flight mindset kind of goes hand in hand with an isolationist kind of mindset, which is kind of the other aspect of this thing is understanding how to build together, how to do life together, how to maybe if we talk about kind of that self-employment versus a bigger business kind of thing, sometimes there's some analogies between like house church versus actually a church with a real church, being like
Yeah.
having pastors and elders and deacons and those kind of things. It's messy, and we
Mm.
we kind of we do life together, and it would sure be easier if it was just me and my wife and kids doing a little home church. That's not what we're called to.
Hmm.
That's not the patterns we see in scripture. And so often we have underdeveloped togetherness muscles. We just don't know how to church together. We don't know
Hmm.
how to work together. And I guess, moving back to the business topic, that ability to work together with other believers and build organizations that have an impact on the communities. I think that's one of the things that I think Christians need to recover in this negative world context
Mm.
is the ability to work well together.
That's awesome. And to get kind of to our podcast is about kingdom of God and the culture, and in the Negative World book, he's using you and your company as an example of a good example of his recommendations for Christians in the world, specifically in the corporate, right? So he's got suggestions for individuals and then or institutions,
Yeah.
right? And he's got suggestions for institutions. And I'm wondering, he's kind of then
Yeah.
saying institutions are a cultural force. And
Mhm.
and so how do you look at your business as a cultural force or a way to either build culture, influence culture, things like that? And how would you encourage other business owners to think about their business in the same way?
Yeah. Okay. That's a great question. I guess one thing I would really affirm about what he's saying there, and like what you're saying, is the influence of institutions.
Mhm.
Back, we were kind of talking about, we live here in the progressive Northwest or whatever, the blue left coast, and we've seen a lot of people leave and go to wherever. We've seen that institutionally too.
Hmm.
We've seen people leaving denominations because, oh, this is too, this went too liberal, and so now I'm going to go be my own micro denomination or whatever. How weak is that to just be
Right.
such a leaver? I mean, we leave everything, and I think that recognition that there is strength in institutions, and we should stay, and we should be a part of efforts to reform our institutions. I think just preliminarily to your question, I would wholeheartedly agree with Aaron's observation that there is significant value in staying in our institutions. And yeah, that can apply to a whole spectrum of institutions.
Well, thanks, man. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your insights on all these things. And guys, until next time. Well, first, before next time, give us 5 stars. Go check out our Patreon. And until next time, labora ad gloriam.